Hello everybody and welcome to another fabulous Friday Ramblings. And this is of course our first one of 2020, so we're going to celebrate the new year with one of my go-to subjects. I've written articles about it. We've done game streams about it. Well, now we're going to go ahead and vloggy ramble about it. Yep, folks. Right here tonight we are discussing the Ghostbusters, but we're not just discussing any old movie. We're not even going to discuss the famous real Ghostbusters cartoon. At least not directly. Hell, we're not even going to go for the infamous Extreme Ghostbusters sequel cartoon. Nope, we are going to go all the way to the side and discuss Ghostbusters comic books. Now, those who followed me tightly have known that I do talk about the fact that I am following the current Ghostbusters work put out by IDW Publishing because it is excellent. However, it's not as simple as that when discussing the history of Ghostbusters in comic book form. See, we actually have to go much farther back than IDW because, as you would expect from a series that started in the 80s, Ghostbusters comics have been in print for a very long time in one form or another from one studio or another. So, this is going to be a bit of a breakdown. Break it down. Gonna break it down. So, let's just go ahead and get it out of the way. And that is the fact that most Ghostbusters comic books for many years, really until the IDW series, were not something very noted here in America. In fact, most of the comics we're going to be discussing were done by publishers in the United Kingdom, and therefore did not see print here in America until after the fact, usually in collection form or used comic book form. So this is part of why I'm doing this, because unless you really get deep into the Ghostbusters fan community, you're not going to be aware of these comic books. Heck, I really wasn't until a few years ago. I'd heard in passing that there had been Ghostbusters comics, but I hadn't really encountered them by and large. So, let's go ahead and start things off. In 1988, the UK publisher Now Comics began printing the Ghostbusters comics, specifically those based off the cartoon show The Real Ghostbusters. See, I told you we'd mention it, just not directly, because, you know, that's what the Ghostbusters was currently. The cartoon had started up, had proven popular in various countries, so they went after the Ghostbusters in the form that most of their audience was used to already seeing on a weekly basis, which is all well and good. Now Comics produced 35. I guess what? Hold on. Alright. However your camera perspective is, whether you're reading from left to right, right to left, but 35 issues of the Ghostbusters comic. This included a 28 Volume 1 run, 5 issues of Volume 2, and 2 annuals. Plus a 3-part, so I guess that would be 38 total, 3-part adaptation of the Ghostbusters 2 film after it had come out Although, in order to fit it in with their comic book, there was some liberties taken with their adaptation, so it kind of fit more in the cartoon world continuity that they had been following while dealing with the events of this movie, which is perfectly reasonable because later seasons of cartoon did in fact acknowledge a version of the movie existed in their continuity, as we did see references to Vigo and Mood Slime. Now, besides that main series, they, inspired by the Slimer-focused segments of the real Ghostbusters cartoon that featured in the last couple seasons, produced a spin-off comic focusing on Slimer and his supporting cast from those secondary segments. And that ran for that ran for 20 issues, including a 3D special. So that took them from 1998 to 1993, at which point they ceased publishing Ghostbusters comics because the company itself was going through financial difficulties and filed for bankruptcy. Which is sad. I never like to hear about businesses going bankrupt unless they're just, just totally horrible, corrupt businesses. But, that's a different thing. But there you go. Now Comics, that summed it up. They did their thing. Wasn't quite the super gangbusters thing they needed, though, to be fair, we're not going to put all the heat on Ghostbusters. They were producing other comics. It was one of many, many factors that led to the bankruptcy. And let me just see real quick, make sure there's nothing really fun we can throw in about that little bit. Founded in 1985. Operated in 12 countries and published almost 1,000 comic books. Most now titles are results of licensing arrangements, resulting in titles like Mr. T and the T-Force, Speed Racer, the original Astro Boy, Terminator, the Burning Earth, the Real Ghostbusters, Fright Night, Married with Children, and the Green Hornet. Yeah, quick little research does not say exactly why, just that the sales on the various titles floundered, and of course anytime you are dealing with licensed comics, we are going to go ahead and address this right quick, because this is a whole discussion on licensed comics. Anytime you deal with licensed titles, you have to pay for the rights to license the characters. Depending on the deal, you are most likely going to be giving some royalties to, or not royalties, but sales percentage to the company that owns the copyright on the characters. It's not exactly a guaranteed profitable business. There's a long history of licensed comic books from a variety of companies, and many of them have not lasted for several decades, like our buddies Marvel and DC, who, while they did do licensed comic books, never went whole hog 100% focus on licensed comic books, so, they were kind of hedging their bets. Yeah, the companies that generally lean 100% on licensed comic books don't have a huge profit margin unless what they do is super, super brilliant and quickly finds a big audience and maintains that audience. But that's pretty much all we're going to say on that matter, because it is a very complicated discussion. It is a very business-heavy discussion, and it's not something I can speak about with any real air of expertise and authority at this time, because I have not done my super serious research But just understand that that is not necessarily proof that Now Comics was writing bad comic books, just that what they were doing was not exactly a guaranteed way to make profit in the long term. So, go ahead and move to our next set of notes. This moves us to Marvel UK, which, as its name implies, is the United Kingdom branch of Marvel Comics. Now, Marvel UK did a combination of reprints of the comic books that were coming out in America by the main Marvel Comics publishing branch, but also created their own original characters and did their own local licensing work. Most famously, Marvel UK created their own version of Captain America, a young man named Brian Braddock, who would go by the name Captain Britain, and would prove popular enough that the character would migrate over to the main Marvel Comics, being published here in America, where he has been around for quite a bit of time now and has enjoyed a reasonable amount of success, along with his supporting cast, including his sister Betsy Braddock, who is more well known to the world as the X-Man Psylocke, and is currently starring in the X-Men books to this day. But as I said, Marvel UK did their own original superheroes, they did reprints of the American books, and they did their own licensing. So, Marvel UK had a run with the Real Ghostbusters license. Again, the Real Ghostbusters, the cartoon version. Because, you know, it's an ongoing cartoon series. It's a little easier to jump into the idea of an ongoing stories being told because that's how the cartoon series was set up. And it was the most current version of Ghostbusters continuity. Now, Marvel UK did last a little longer, and as far as number of issues published over a number of years. Now, because of Marvel UK's printing schedules, the first 12 comics would be printed on a bi-weekly schedule, and then they switched to weekly for the rest of the run except the last 8 issues, or is it 8? Whichever you prefer. The 8 issues which were released monthly. Now they did a total of 193 regular issues and 4 annuals, for a total of 197 original issues, along with various collections. And that would run from That would run from 88 to 92. So, excuse me, they did more issues, but actually a slightly shorter time frame than the Now Comics. And as you may have noticed from those years thrown out there, done at the same time as Now Comics. Now, I'm not really well versed on British licensing rights. I don't know why 2 companies were simultaneously publishing licensed books and how common that was, especially in the 80s and early 90s. We'll have to tackle that on another future blog. But both companies were publishing their books at roughly the same time because Marvel was doing theirs on a bi-weekly and weekly schedule. They did get more issues out in that time period before eventually the licensing agreement expired. Now, again, I personally have not read these books. I cannot tell you exactly how high quality they were, but the fact that they were printed at that high a volume means there was an audience, and the good news is that these books are still in print in trade paperback omnibus form. And as such, for those who like things digital, I'm sure you can find some digital copies relatively easily online. So much like Now Comics, while I cannot personally recommend them under the claims of, hey, I've read it and it's awesome, I can say that it would be easy for you to try them out yourself if you are a fan of the Ghostbusters and specifically the real Ghostbusters continuity. Now from here on out, we get into a little bit of a different matter because the cartoon series quit being the main continuity, mostly due to the fact that the cartoon series did end. And we are getting different studios involved here. Pardon me, folks. It's, I'm a sinusy person. My nose tends to itch a lot. Forgive me. So, we're going to go ahead and run through the rest of these real quick. Because these next couple entries are going to be short entries. A Quebec-based publisher by the name of 88 Miles Per Hour Studios did a one-off series as well as a one-off comic book issue. Blah blah. One-off series would be a little self-contradictory, as well as a 4-issue mini-series under the title of Ghostbusters Legion. Now, I can say that I did recently acquire Ghostbusters Legion. I did not read it yet. I have quite a backlog of stuff to read. And I do try to read in the order that I obtain stuff, which seems silly. You think I would have gone ahead and read Legion before I discussed it. But what can I say, folks? I'd really been wanting to do a discussion on the Ghostbusters comics for a while now. So, bam, we're getting this out in the open. But what I can tell you is that the Ghostbusters Legion comic was based more in the continuity of the movies as opposed to the cartoon series. And if you give me just a second, I'll actually show off some of these covers. Woo! Yes, bagged and boarded for safety. Look at this lovely cover art. And I mean, I'm not even being sarcastic or anything. Like, that is legitimately interesting cover art. But yes, I bought this from an online comic book retailer who had them on sale for a nice price. And that would be issue 4. So, I mean, I gotta say, I'm intrigued just by the cover art. Set these down here to keep them safe. But, as I said, it was a very small publisher, and like a lot of small publishers, they tend not to have very long licensing agreements. So, look forward to what will most likely be a written review of the Ghostbusters Legion article in the relatively near future. And the reason I'm going to go ahead and do that, besides, as I said, I want to go ahead and get this video out of the way because it's been sitting in my brain and it won't get out of my brain till I do it. But I have reviewed various other Ghostbusters comic book miniseries in written format, so I do want to create a bit of consistency there. And again, I'm going to go ahead and get the plug out. RouletteProductions.com. I will have a link in the video description as well. That is the home of all my written articles. Feel free to thumb through them. They are from the Idw Era, which we'll be talking about in just a moment. But primarily, it is, because that's what I have access to. So keep an eye on my Twitter, which is also going to be in the video description. I will happily announce when that written article goes up. So let's go ahead, and we got one more stop before we get to the current company and the relatively current era, and that is in 2008. Tokyo Pop published a manga called Ghostbusters Ghostbusted. It exists in one trade paperback, contains several stories, mostly focused on smaller individual cases around town. Of course, when I say around town, I mean New York City, because that's where the Ghostbusters are located. And I have read through that one time. It's not a bad series. I mean, the stories are, about as interesting as a lot of the real Ghostbusters cartoon episodes, which did vary in quality, from season to season, episode to episode. But it is worth a read once if you are a fan of the Ghostbusters and do like your comic book format stuff. I'm not a huge fan of the art in all of the chapters. It tends to get a bit crowded and busy for my taste, especially since, like any good manga, it is printed in black and white form. And so it's stuffed kind of blends into the background a little bit if you're not studying the panels very closely, and there is a lot going on, especially action. There's an art to drawing black and white comic books. That's what makes the best manga artists such incredible artists, is that they do know how to get the most out of working with two colors. So, I can't say I've read through it just the once. I'll give it a medium level recommend. As I said, the stories themselves are interesting. The art leaves a little bit to be desired. But the good news is it is just one trade, so it is a relatively short read, even if you don't get a huge fan of it. So this brings us up to the biggest era, the IDW era. IDW started printing Ghostbusters comics in October 2008. So yes, around the time the Ghostbusted manga came out. IDW still currently holds the Ghostbusters license. Now, they did a series of minis and one-shots for the first 3 years. The monthly comic series started in 2011. And they have done mini-series in between and throughout since. The original minis and one-shots were not necessarily intended to have hard continuity with each other. I have them in an omnibus format. In fact, let me go ahead and grab that one right here. This was... Whoop, there we go. This was my start to the IDW publishing world of Ghostbusters. This is 2 minis and a series of holiday-themed one-shots, which would be 2 limited series are referred to The Other Side and Displaced Aggression. And the holiday themes are referred to as Haunted Holidays, because I believe they were initially collected as their own trade as that. But specifically, the individual ones is Tainted Love, Convolution, What in Sam Hain Just Happened, and Past, Present, and Future. Now, I will say, even though a different writer came on for the ongoing series, he did acknowledge the events of some of these minis. Specifically, the Valentine's Day mini, which introduced the character of Tia Clark, who would go on to show up as a recurring supporting character. I will not tell you why, because that is spoilers. And because I did do what I feel was quite a nice written review of the omnibus as part of that series, I did go ahead and self-promote earlier. So check it out at rouletteproductions.com. So from there on out, we got the monthly series as well as various crossovers and tie-ins. There was Ghostbusters chapters in both Infestation events, as well as 2 crossing over with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which do definitely have continuity with the comic books, as the events of the first series led to a kind of status quo shift in the Ghostbusters monthly series continuity due to it introducing the Ghostbusters to the idea of a multiverse and alternate Earths, which is a plot point that has figured heavily into the Ghostbusters series since then. Don't worry, it doesn't get all like, I'm trying to think of the right cartoons here, or right pop culture reference here. It doesn't get all, super sci-fi, constantly fighting doppelgangers of each other approach. It is done in a way that much better, is often subtle, but does flow much better into the existing continuity of the Ghostbusters monthly series, which is extremely excellent. It is, outside of the 2 movies and the better episodes of the cartoons, whew, I feel a sneeze coming on. I'm going to try to repress it. The best Ghostbusters stories I've ever encountered. So, by all means, please go ahead, pick up the ongoing series. Personally, I would start with the Omnibus. And then if you like that, go into the ongoings. There are omnibus collections of most of the run of the monthly series, as well as trade paperback collections of the crossovers with the Ninja Turtles. The ongoing series has been broken down into 3 volumes. Volume 1, Volume 2, which for the first 4 issues was referred to as New Ghostbusters due to the story arc that launched it, and Volume 3, which was titled Ghostbusters International. There was also a Ghostbusters tie-in to the X-Files conspiracy event, which had the X-Files crossing over with various other licensed properties that IDW owns. It is a very interesting storyline, especially if you are a fan of the X-Files as well. They later did various minis where the Ghostbusters of the IDW series, which is primarily based off the movies, crossed over with the real Ghostbusters counterparts. They have done minis where they crossed over with the female cast of the reboot Ghostbusters Answer the Call movie. And I will go ahead and say that those crossover stories, along with a Answer the Call focused mini that came out as well, are worth checking out. I will freely admit I was disappointed in that reboot movie. There is some good things to it, and I feel like the comic book did a good job of focusing on the strengths of the reboot and moving past the weaknesses that the movie highlighted. So go ahead and give those a try. There was actually a wonderful mini that concluded recently. Well, I say recently, but it's probably about a year or so ago. Recent in my mind, because I tend to look at comic books in a multi-year long range form because they're comic books. You know. So, where the Ghostbusters not only worked with their real Ghostbusters counterparts and the Answer the Call crew, but also with every other Ghostbusters version there ever was. They encounter the Extreme Ghostbusters crew. They encounter the crew from the Ghostbusters Sanctum of Slime video game from a few years ago. They encounter Ghostbusters from just everything. I think they encountered the ones from the Ghostbusted manga. They encountered Ghostbusters from, alternate realms that were hinted at or briefly seen in the cartoons and the earlier runs of the comic books. It was a huge event series that was absolute 100% fan service. The good news is, if you are not a super diehard Ghostbusters fan, you can still read it and appreciate it, because they do give you a quick breakdown of who's who and why they're different from our core Ghostbusters crew, and the art is excellent enough that you do not confuse the different alternate variants of any given character, which is always a good thing when you deal with alternate reality crossover events like this. I think currently, because I do tend to read the Ghostbusters in trade, so I'm usually a mini-series or two behind. But the most recent thing I saw solicited was a Ghostbusters Transformers crossover, which I think they're still printing the singles issues of, so therefore the trade has not come out yet. But I will definitely pick that up, because I buy everything IDW puts out that's Ghostbusters. They've also done a few one-shots. There was a Deviations event where IDW did one-shots for their various licensed titles that served kind of like Marvel's old What If, where it was, hey, in the case of the Ghostbusters one, what if Gozer won at the end of the first movie? There was a Ghostbusters Funko Universe one-shot. Let me see. There's been a few different annuals. There was part of the they did a series of 35th anniversary one-shots. I say a series of one-shots for the 35th anniversary because each issue showed a different alternate reality version. There was the core crew that we know of the comics, the real Ghostbusters, Answer the Call, which, as I said, is the reboot film Ghostbusters, the Extreme Ghostbusters. Okay, excuse me. They have solicited a Ghostbusters Year 1 mini. Let me see real quick if that's actually come out yet. Okay, that comes out later this month, January 22nd. So, as part of a kind of loose tie-in promotional thing to the upcoming Ghostbusters Afterlife film that's coming out in this summer. So, if you want a good jumping on point and you want to look at stuff that's more current before you dig into the back catalog, look at that. In 20 days, go to your comic book shop, pick up your first issue of Ghostbusters Year 1. So, where does this bring us all back to? Ultimately, the Ghostbusters as a franchise has, even if it's not necessarily the super spotlight mainstream, continued to exist in one form or another. We had a long gap of time between Ghostbusters 2 and the Answer the Call remake as far as movies go. The cartoon series did end. There was a couple years gap between it and the start of Extreme Ghostbusters. Extreme Ghostbusters itself only ran one season. So yeah, on television there has been a long gap. There's not been any new TV series, which makes me sad because really, I think IDW's proven that there's still interest among the Ghostbusters community for serial storytelling involving our boys. And yes, even the girls, because once again, I'm going to throw this out for people that think that any disappointment I have in the Ghostbusters remake had to do with them casting females as Ghostbusters. It is not. Because as somebody who enjoyed the cartoons and the comics of various forms, yes, Janine would occasionally at times work as a backup Ghostbuster. In Extreme Ghostbusters, one of the core crew was a female, Kylie Griffin, who had a Prime Earth version of her appear through the IDW comics, which means yes, in that big all the alternate Ghostbusters event, which was called Ghostbusters Crossing Over, appropriately enough, we even got to see that version of her interact with her Extreme Ghostbusters counterpart, because, hey, funny games. So, yeah, it's not about the gender of the Ghostbusters. It never really was. As I said, IDW's use of the Answer the Call crew has been more enjoyable to me and for me than the movies. So, you know, at least as far as I go, I can't speak for other fans. I can't speak for just casual people who are aware of the Ghostbusters and have only seen the movies because they like movies in general. I can't speak for why they may or may not have liked the reboot, but in my case, no. The gender never entered into it. I never cared about that aspect, outside of the fact that certain marketing and advertising for it and certain social media reactions to the criticism of the initial trailers, they seem to think it was a bigger deal than it was, and in essence created a self-fulfilling prophecy. But again, that's something that we're going to discuss when we do a more thorough breakdown of the movie. This has been a little bit of a short blog. We are not going to hit our hour mark. Looks like we're going to hit right about 40 minutes here. So I'm going to sign off for now because I've discussed what I need to discuss. I've gotten it off my chest. And I hope you join me next Friday for another rambling vlog of pop culture fun. I'm going to promise it's not going to be Ghostbusters related. We'll probably bounce back around to video games. I don't know yet. I'm going to flip a coin because, as I said, I usually have 2 or 3 topic ideas in my head. So, thumbs up to all my listeners. Woo! Dancing thumbs, happy, happy dancing thumbs. Thumbs up to all my listeners. Thumbs up to all my viewers, if you want to be called that. Thumbs up to anybody who watches me. Because, hey, I know time's precious. I know you got a lot of options out there for entertainment or even thought-provoking content. So, we're going to start off 2020 with a lot of love. All my love to the community. And see you next week.